My name is Sean Powers, and I design shadow puppet theater and perform it for audiences. I have a big pieces of paper here. This is my cardstock, which I'll start cutting puppets out of. But first, I have to figure out what the puppets are going to look like, how they're going to move, what parts are going to move, and how many versions of one puppet I might use. Like, for example, I might make a small version of a puppet, and then a large version, and then one that might be more mobile, or one that might just be just a cutout with no movement at all. Another character in the show is Monkey, and so I'm designing different forms that Monkey could be seen in. I'm showing where he's going to be moving to already. He's going to have pins here, and so his personality is coming out through the drawing. And here's Rooster. Rooster is another character in the story. When I do the cutting out the puppets, first I would usually use a pair of scissors to do the outside cuts because it's just quicker. And instead of, I like to move my hands around. Instead of moving the paper or moving your scissors, you move the paper around like this, and it cuts a lot more efficiently. And you get the basic shape, and like it's easy to do your fill in your mistakes because you're cutting on the outside. You're doing it fairly fast. It's not really a perfection thing because it's a shadow. There's a lot of play in the imagery. So I already have drawn the lines where I'm going to cut, and I'm not going to exactly follow that, but I'm going to just use that. And I press slightly into the cardstock, and I have something underneath it so that it's easier to cut and I don't cut into your table, because you'll dull your blades really quick if you're cutting into wood or anything. So I try to put a piece of cardboard underneath it, some scraps or whatever. Or you can actually get these architectural boards that are, it's some kind of material that will not dull the blade, and they're about so big and they have graph marks on it and everything. But this, I'll just use a piece of scrap cardstock. And the inside cuts are really important because they bring out to define the lines of the character that you've drawn out. If you don't have those, then it's just a big black figure, a silhouette, and that's fine too, but you really want to have those inside cuts, and you're really working on the idea of exaggeration, because the shadow puppets are you can do so much with just a shadow that you can really use these lines to their fullest. Now I use the end of it and poke it out if I have to. Now see, there's the outline, and what I do every once in a while is I take it and I look up and put it like that in sunlight, and it gives me like, oh yeah, there's the line of the cat's head and his ear, and then I'll do the eyes, and again it's just pressing a little bit hard, and this isn't a thing for a big person to use because, again, this is a very sharp tool, and it doesn't have to be super fancy. It could be very basic, a couple lines. I like to go pretty complicated because I've been doing it for a while, and it makes it look really good. And you also have to remember that your lines, if you keep cutting out more and more, like this ear, it might fall apart. It might fall right out. So if I was to do something like that, the whole puppet would be destroyed and I had to start all over again. So then again, I look at it like that, and it's coming out. You see that? And sometimes I'll cut and then I'll stop. I'll do a stop cut, which means that you cut down and you cut across, and then that piece will come right out. And then I'll just do a little section here that's still connected, so it doesn't look so floppy. So you can see right there that it won't be so noticeable, but this is still connected and it won't come apart eventually. So again, here it goes. And sometimes it can go really fast if you know where your lines are going. And again, I'm pressing slightly. You can hear a sound. When you hear that sound, you know it's cutting straight through, because you can kind of cut it and it won't cut through, but if you apply the right pressure, it'll come right through. So I look at it again, and here's the cat's paw. I make it go like this. And again, remember, don't be a perfectionist when you're doing these puppets, because it'll look good no matter what. And here's a point where if I cut out too much of a chunk, the puppet would start falling apart and get really unstable. So I leave a little tiny there, and then I do it again here. I call it a paper bridge, meaning that there's still a connection between the two sections. And then I'll look at it through the light again, and I'll go, yeah, that looks pretty good. And then I'll do it again, and here's another one. And I can even use a shadow. You can see that on the table there. Now see, I need to still do some more lines, like the whiskers and the outline of his face more, and then his face will come out more. So that's making of the cat. The sticks that I use are bamboo skewers, which you get a package of them for like $3, and you get about 100 of them. They're really strong, and they're flexible, and they're light. And they have a sharp point on the end of them, so I usually take my scissors and I cut that off because it's very, very sharp, and bamboo, it's like I even try to dull it off a little bit. The taping on of an object to a piece of cardboard is called a butterfly, and you take a piece like this, and it's about that long, and I take another piece. Now this tape I'm using is a masking tape, and it's pretty thin. I usually use something thicker, but it doesn't really matter. You can use a stronger tape, but this is kind of transparent, and it might show up a little less. And so there is the way that you would make, and then I would take another piece maybe. And sometimes I would tear out a bunch of pieces beforehand, so I just have them ready. And I take this on the end of it, and I just make it a little bit tighter. You have your main support, which is the head and the tail end. And so that's your main support. And so you're holding that with one hand, and the other parts that are moving you're using with your left hand, or right or left, it doesn't matter. But see, I can make him do this, I can make his tail go up. That's a bit too much, but you get the idea. And you always have a kind of a place of pivotal center. So I usually take it in my hand like this, and I hold it, and I go, oh, well, that's pretty balanced. I'll put a stick there. For the cat, you know, he'll just have one stick, and it'll go right here. And this was like a hinge too. Have a hinge, see, it goes up and down like that. I can lean it up against this, I can lean it up against the screen, and it'll stay all by itself. And so that way I can move my hands and go do something else, and this puppet will still be there. Now, the brads, again, I showed you the brads, but they're just little pins, and I use the hole punch, and I kind of keep track of where each piece is going so I don't lose all my pieces. And it's really basic. This is, you know, you just line the holes up, you put the brads in there like that, and you just fold it down on either side. And if you want it to be really tight, then you fold these really tight like that, and it makes it stiff. And this is the snake. So he can be really flexible, and he could do a lot. He's like, yes, and his voice will be like this. Of course, because he's a snake, you know. And he can move across the screen. And if you want it to be loose, then you just kind of put it in there, and it can be really loose then. It can be like really flexible. But I like them kind of tight so they don't get too flexible and bob around. Kids really love the hole punch. And it doesn't take that much to make a hole into something. You just line it up, and voila, you have a hole ready for brads. And you also have to remember that when you're cutting out your figures, you want to give enough area for your arm or your leg or whatever it's going to be to have some strength to it. And so I give it lots of space over that hole. Like, oh no, I got it too thin, and it's going to fall apart. So I reinforce it all the way around, and then I just punch that hole again, and that piece of tape will make it strong enough to stay together. And that's how I deal with that problem, because sometimes you do cut it too small. You're working with really some small piece. And here's Monkey that I figured out to make from those drawings. And he's all cut out, and he has the brad pins in him and all the sticks. And so when I'm doing my puppet show, this part is up to the screen, so I'm looking at this part. And so Monkey's movements are very bouncy, So he's very flexible. I make one arm has two joints in it, and then this other arm doesn't, just one piece, because I only have two hands, and so I have to choose what I'm going to be making the most use of. And I put these strings, attached strings to the back of his legs here, so that his legs wouldn't go bend in an unnatural way, because I try to, if I didn't do that, his legs would go outward and it just wouldn't look as good. And so same with the mouth, I might put some kind of spring on the mouth or something where it stops it from going too far, right? And so Monkey's like this, and in the play, Monkey's going to be upside down the whole time.
If you want to ride with me, I'll get you there really quick. Come on, come on, come on. I'll show you how to get there. Come on, come on, come on, come on. Jump on my back and we'll get there really quick.